Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by Adam Ilenich, head of community at Rarible. Prior to joining Rarible in March of this year, Adam worked at Twitter for 3.5 years, first as community manager, then as social lead, where he ran the @Twitter marketing handle and produced some of the highest performing content on the channel. Rarible recently released Rarible 2, which is an aggregated marketplace that aims to offer the best prices for listings from the top NFT marketplaces hosting Ethereum NFTs. Adam, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for today's conversation.
We're excited too. There's all sorts of things to dive into. I want to start off in a bit of a different direction though, because my understanding is that your background is in journalism, what you studied. Yeah. And that's similar to myself. And what I want to ask you about is my experience going through journalism was that graduated the program, and a lot of the people who did weren't able to land the typical journalism jobs, such as newspaper, journalism industry's dying. People had that type of attitude. Whereas I always saw it a little bit different because of the content creation opportunities and how I leveraged that degree. I'm curious for yourself, somebody who's been successful at Twitter and now moved into Rarible, how has journalism specifically impacted your career?
That's a great question, and I'm happy to have a fellow journalist in the room. I think my love of journalism really started in undergrad, where I went to school at Michigan State, which is in East Lansing. It's right next to the state's capital, and so I really wanted to become a political reporter. I had, I eventually pursued a degree in journalism as well as a degree in political theory, and so I really thought that was going to be what I wanted to do. I did several internships in undergrad that led me to find out that was actually a very boring application of my skills. And so I ended up pivoting slightly into doing more of political PR. And that sort of introduced me to the world of content creation, spinning things, articles on the other side. So I'm no longer really the journalist. I'm the person who's trying to place things. So that was really exciting. And then that opened me up to the world of advertising and copywriting and all of these new things. So I then moved to New York. I started an ad agency. And then, here we are, having worked at Twitter and having now run a team at Rarible. But when it comes to journalism, I really find that there's two key ingredients, for me at least, that have helped me apply those skills. One is just really, really sharp writing. I think there's so much content. I have this love-hate relationship with that word. There's so much content out there and so much of it is bad. It's so easy when you think about yourself on Twitter to just scroll past poorly written tweets. You sort of read it, you lose interest, you keep going. And so having a sharp focus to your writing is essential if you want to sort of grab people's attention now. I think the other thing for me is just this unbridled curiosity. Journalists, a lot of times, they want to get to the meat of things. They want to understand how things work. They want to, find that inner truth. And so for me in a community role, if I can find the truth about what people are looking for when it comes to their relationship with a marketplace, a relationship with NFTs, a relationship with a broader collections community, then I can help serve them better. So those are two things that have really, really helped me in my career, and that I'm looking to hone as I, continue in this space.
Now, as Wade mentioned in the bio, you were at Twitter before joining Rarible. Twitter's a huge organization, and it's
Well, not anymore. Like so many people got laid off.
Yeah, good point. Good point. But and just even in the crypto space in general, I mean, Twitter is the place to be. Crypto Twitter is where people hang out in the world of Web3 and everything crypto, blockchain, NFTs, you name it. So what was it like working at Twitter? What did you learn from that experience? And, what was it like transitioning into Rarible?
Yeah, Twitter was such an amazing place to work. And just sort of a caveat for the audience, I left in March. So this was pre Elon Musk. This is sort of pre all of the currently, existing acquisition drama. But working there was amazing. Working at Twitter with so many sharp people really makes you hone the skills that you have that you think are great. And usually they are great into being just sort of like a masterful set of skills. I mentioned copywriting sort of as one where in order to break through, you really have to know how to write copy and hook people's attention. And when I think about tweets from Twitter, they have to be the best tweets in order to get approved, in order to be seen, in order to, get the attention and the engagement that we were looking for. So the experience was fantastic. It really sharpened me. I think, everything that's going on right now is a little bit unfortunate. There's so many people at Twitter who I know personally who were laid off, who were working on really, really groundbreaking work, particularly around health and safety, content moderation. It's this age-old question of like, where is the balance between free speech and terms of service? Like you can't threaten people, you can't misgender people, you can't, do all of these things that create an unhealthy and unsafe environment. I mean, unless those, rules are rolled back, of course. There's so many people who were working on really incredible work that I'm sad to see them no longer at Twitter. But I'm curious, I'm sort of leaned in at the edge of my seat to sort of see what the plan is, to see what ends up happening. And I guess only time will tell.
Yeah, 100%. But I'm wondering, some of those old coworkers or former coworkers, what were their experiences? Like, have you had many conversations? And, obviously it's upsetting probably to see some of them let go, but like from their perspective, it seemed like a lot of drama from the outside looking in, but what was their experience like when Elon took over and then them maybe finding out that they no longer had a job?
Yeah, I did speak to a couple members of the team that I used to be on. They were on like the business marketing team, and they were sort of like insulated from a lot of the decisions that were made on like the consumer facing teams. But by insulated, I don't mean that they weren't impacted. They absolutely were. I think like when it comes to smart people who know their worth, they're not interested in being like yanked around. So of course, while it's like sad to be like let go, I've been seeing reports. I personally can't corroborate them, but I've seen reports saying that people have been asked to come back, particularly engineers. And some of them have said no, just because it's really not worth it to have gone through all of this to rejoin an unstable organization. It's sort of like getting broken up with by your crazy ex, and then they show up in the middle of the night screaming that they want you back. Like, why would I go back to that? So again, I personally can't corroborate that story, but I've seen a lot of tweets and I have no reason to believe that they're untrue. So yeah, I would say that it's going to be an uphill battle, much more than I think Elon might have thought before having made this decision to lay off more than half the company.
Well, let's jump into Rarible and your transition, your move from Twitter to Rarible. What made you want to get into the Web3 space? Why did you make that leap?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. There were two particular instances that sort of introduced me to the world of Web3 and made me want to move over to Rarible. The first was Twitter dropped an NFT collection. This was probably in 2021. It's hard for me to remember time because there was COVID. And, now there's Elon Musk and there's like all of these things, but I'm pretty sure it was 2021. Twitter dropped an NFT collection. So that was pretty cool. I was like, okay, I didn't work on that particularly, but I remember being a part of like the conversations, and just seeing it and being like, okay, like this is real. Like Twitter is really the forefront of what's happening in culture. And so if Twitter itself is dropping an NFT collection, this is something to sort of pay attention to. And then earlier this year, I was able to work on the Hexagon PFP project and marketing that. And so I was like, okay, Twitter is really embracing this like NFT thing. Like this has to be something. And concurrently, while that was happening, I was just trying to educate myself more. And so I was at ETH Denver. I ended up meeting the team at Rarible, and I was like, like this is actually pretty cool stuff. And this is, of course, like before the huge sell-offs, this is like the very last bit of like the bull market. I remember like maybe back in November, we were seeing like the all-time highs. And then I was talking to Rarible in maybe like February, March. So we were still up a lot, much more than we are right now. And so I was like, you know what, this is cool. This is emerging technology. This is an opportunity for me to lead a team. And it's also, I was at a stage in my career where I was ready to take some of those like bigger, riskier swings, proverbially. So I was really excited, talked to the Rarible team. We, figured something out, and I ended up jumping ship and landing at Rarible.
Was that Twitter NFT project your first kind of like foray or your entry into crypto, or did you have an awareness level of crypto and NFTs prior to that?
Yeah, that was my first ever awareness. I mean, of course, I knew what Bitcoin and Ethereum in general. I knew what cryptocurrency was in general, but I didn't own any. I didn't know how to own any. I couldn't tell you what a wallet was. I couldn't tell you what NFT even stood for. So seeing that project, seeing Twitter drop that project, was pretty fundamental for me to saying like, wow, this is something I need to pay attention to. I also I have this like very short anecdote, that will, I think, like pull some people's heartstrings in a good way. I had a friend who got one of the Twitter NFTs, and the way that they were dropped was they were just sort of like given out for free to people who, engaged with certain tweets, who showed that they have a level of understanding of Web3, who had ETH wallet addresses, et cetera. So one of my friends, her name is Adrian, got one of the NFTs. She sold it for like 200K. Again, wow. This is like the height of the bull market. She sold it for 200K and became the first person in her family to own property. Wow. And her parents are immigrants. And so she was able to like buy property for her parents. And it just was like incredible, like the change at which I saw this technology impact the world. And that was just one instance in my immediate periphery. And then, multiply that by 10 or 100 or 1,000 of all the stories we don't know about, it became really, really cool. So I was like, I need to pay attention to this. This is changing the world. This is changing people's lives. And that's where that curiosity took over that I talked about earlier, which is like, I want to know how this works. I want to know how this is doing what it's doing. And that sort of led me into the world of NFTs, more broadly crypto and blockchain. So really cool stuff.
I love that story. It's so awesome when we have a guest on who shares one of their stories about how crypto literally changed someone's life. Because I think if you're in this space, even just somewhat, there's usually a story of a friend or a friend of a friend, someone who, even if just by extension, who crypto impacted in such a monumental positive way. And you're right, those are the stories. Like, we can talk about all like the little things, ups and downs of the market and things that maybe they don't matter as much. But when you hear a story about like someone's actual life being changed because of crypto, that's when it kind of hits home a lot more, the impact that this can have. And for sure, a lot of it still might just relate to price speculation and selling at the highs. But regardless, if it can change someone's life, it can change someone's life. What are your thoughts on like how crypto has impacted the world in those more, individual level stories, and how it's been able to really change people's lives, at least, the special ones who maybe got a little lucky with it?
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping you guys will have me back in maybe like a year or 2 or 3, at which point like Bitcoin and Ethereum will have 100x. I'm hoping.
Yeah.
And so I will be able to talk to you about my story and how it changed my life.
There we go.
But until then, we're seeing a little bit of a dip right now. But until then, I have a couple other stories, not nearly, I don't think, as life-changing as my friend Adrian, but another story was that there was someone at a friend of mine who worked at a VC, and he was trying to hire me for a similar role, like a community role, particularly to help build out this VC's presence in the Web3 world and to help sort of be the like culture, almost like moderator, the culture person for their investments for Web3. That role wasn't exactly the right fit. But I ended up meeting this great like group of people who I now consider some of my closest friends. This was, last year. And so in terms of changing people's lives, like I was able to meet a community of people who are literally on the forefront of building blockchain technology, people who are investing in blockchain startups, who are investing in NFT collections, who are investing and who are giving people the opportunity to help build this space literally as it's happening. It's like, I don't know if you've heard the phrase like paving the road while you're driving on it, which is like a very exciting time. It's a very risky time, but very exciting time. And so some of these friends have become like very monumental figures in my life. And so we all get together, we talk about crypto, we talk about prices, we talk about NFTs, we talk about, where we're going, who the hottest minds are. And so it's changed my life in a really big way. And I'm super thankful for that.
One last thing I want to ask you about before we kind of jump deeper into Rarible is, given your background working for Twitter, we see these little steps happening. So you mentioned being a part of the hexagon profile photo project. Recently, Instagram announced that they are going to have the ability to buy, sell NFTs. And so they're clearly integrating. And it's interesting because there's some attitudes in the Web3 space of, Web2 social media, that's everything that's wrong with the world. It's terrible. All of those sorts of things. We got to build our own system. But then there's others who are like, no, this integration's really good. This is what's going to fuel massive user growth. What's kind of your opinion on, I guess, both of those pieces? One, what these companies like Instagram are doing, introducing these pieces of innovation. And then two, just like the macro conversation of how social media legacy companies fit into this new world of Web3.
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe in sort of a hybrid approach to onboarding. So like if we just take like MetaMask, for example, like that UI is not always going to be user friendly. MetaMask is not going to onboard like billions of people to Ethereum. It's just not in its current form. And I don't even think that like a better, like Rainbow Wallet is like slightly better designed. It has like more of like a Web2 feel to it. But those types, it's just, we're not going to get the adoption that we're looking for if we keep just like pummeling home like the Web3 narrative, the like purist narrative. This is, again, my opinion. So these, sort of like hybrid approaches where like a Web2 company that has extremely deep reach into people with expendable income. When I think about millennials, it's like, yeah, absolutely. Millennials are probably going to be the first generation that has massive adoption of Web3 technologies. So Instagram makes total sense. I think that if done correctly, like if you can set up a wallet, if you can, purchase maybe through a credit card, but maybe through crypto. I haven't personally used it yet, but if you can do all of those things and make it easy, I think that's how we get 1 billion people onboarded, not through this like very purist, like it has to be Web3 native, it has to look bad, it has to be complicated. Because at the early stages of, Web3, and even now in some degrees, it is complicated. It is tough. Like sometimes even like using cold storage, that can be challenging to people when you're trying to figure out like, what's the right wallet address? Do I have to sign this transaction? What does it mean to like give permission? All these things. So I think that the way that we can onboard those billions of people is through these like Web2 companies, particularly Instagram, and then also through brands. I think that's a really great opportunity. Where I do see sort of like the hesitation from the broader Web3 community, though, is, a lot of these social networks, they monetize off of people's content. They monetize off of people's data, and they monetize off of their ideas. And so I get it. They don't want those brands sort of becoming the new giants in Web3, which is all about transparency. It's all about privacy. It's all about, owning your content, owning your data, owning your keys, et cetera. So I get it. But I do think for the health of the broader space, we are going to need these Web2 partners. And so where I think the opportunity is for a bunch of smart people to go to Instagram and say like, hey, this is how you do it properly. Or to go to, I don't know, like, I guess Facebook already owns Instagram, but like to go to these like broader partners and say like, hey, this is how you do this right. And then see what happens. I can't imagine that we're going to reach the adoption that we're all looking for just by like beating the dead horse. So we need these partners.
I wonder with someone like Meta, obviously we're kind of talking about the same company here, but like with Meta and their approach to the metaverse and what they're trying to push for, I mean, it's a little different. I guess it's more of a broader conversation since we're not just talking about, like NFT integration in your social app. We're talking about trying to build a whole social space in VR and AR and your work and everything you do. They're trying to truly, build a metaverse that the hope is gets a lot of traction. But with a metaverse, if we talk beyond just like VR and sort of like the virtual aspect of it, the thought in the world of Web3 is that there's going to be implementation of real Web3 technologies. And I wonder, because like you just said, I mean, Web3 is all about, it's about privacy. It's about transparency, these things that you got to wonder, like, is Meta going to have any of that really? Or are they just going to still own everything? And what's going to happen if they do onboard billions of users? Do they then own the market, and is the metaverse ruined? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. My therapist always encourages me to look for like the gray areas and not to necessarily immediately jump to like black and white. So if Meta, successfully builds a metaverse, does that mean that no other metaverses succeed? No, I think like competition, particularly in this space, will always be healthy and encouraged. So for example, like Other Side, that will be its own metaverse that I believe will be remarkably successful, given Yuga's track record, given the other partner collections, given the demand for the market. I mean, the other deeds, like the prices are quite low right now, but I think that's just like macro sentiment in the market as opposed to like people's belief in the metaverse. When I think about like Fortnite, for example, a great Web2 sort of application of everything we're talking about, where people come together, you sort of like are playing this game in this other world. I mean, it's slightly different because, you don't really own land there. You don't own your weapons or your skins or anything else. You can't trade them, you can't sell them. So, there are some differences here, but I do think that there are going to be different metaverses for different purposes. I think if Meta wants to build like almost like a remote work metaverse where you can like join a meeting as like a full-bodied person and like be in there with your coworkers, great. I don't think that will necessarily translate well to like a gaming environment or like a lifestyle environment, like a Sims. Or like there's a lot of talk about like Ready Player One and how like that is sort of like the gold standard of like the metaverse. I don't think Meta is going to build that. I think they're going to build something that they can monetize, and it's going to be like heavily influenced by Web 2. I do think other companies are going to build that like Ready Player One type metaverse. And if Fortnite's any example, I think that the technology like will come.
Ulf, do you realize our audience has been either watching or listening to this episode for 20 minutes?
20 minutes?
No, they should probably subscribe.
Yeah, they should subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment and turn on notifications. And if you're listening to this podcast, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and a review.
We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. So go check out the episode description. You can find all that information below. And we have an update on the NFT, don't we?
That's right. We didn't previously mention this, but this NFT for our OG supporter is a one of one. There will only be one of this kind ever minted, and we have a few surprises for the person who purchases it. The link is in the episode description.
And back to the episode.
So Adam, Rarible is really a household name in the Web3 community. A lot of people know about this. For the audience member who may be listening to this or watching this episode who perhaps hasn't heard of Rarible, what is Rarible?
Yeah, so Rarible is an aggregated marketplace. And what we mean by that is that it's a marketplace where you can buy, sell, trade, and bid on NFTs, very similar to like an eBay. Also, like we have several competitors who do similar things. People have probably heard of OpenSea, LooksRare, X2Y2. So we are a marketplace. But recently, we introduced sort of an aggregator type technology where that means we pull in orders from a lot of these other marketplaces. So when you come to Rarible and search a collection, let's say Doodles, you're going to see Doodles listings from all over, which will sort of show you the lowest price. So it's a really like easy and great way to shop for NFTs because you don't have to bounce between different marketplaces looking for the lowest price, or if, a particular NFT, I'm just going to use Doodles again, is listed on, another marketplace for a certain price. And then you go to another place and it's listed for a different price. And then another marketplace at different price, we're going to show all of that to you. So it's a really great way to experience NFT collections while also getting the lowest price.
And that's relatively new. Obviously, Rarible's gone through, a lot of changes and evolution over the years. Can you explain some of that evolution? Like, where did Rarible start, and what are the changes you've gone to where Rarible is today?
Yeah, so Rarible was one of the first NFT marketplaces, and it really became popular with sort of digital fine artists. There's a whole series of artists out there who first minted on Rarible, who it was sort of like the cool cousin of like the more like traditional marketplaces where it was like, yeah, come do art. It can be ugly. It can be pretty. It can be whatever we want. We're all sort of learning and growing at the same time. So Rarible was sort of like a cool place to be back in the day. Then I think, other marketplaces sort of just took over as PFP and like 10,000 generative collections started to become more popular. We were still sort of like driving home like the art narrative while other marketplaces were sort of embracing PFPs. As you know, a lot of marketplaces make fees off of every transaction. So let's say 2.5%. And if you're trading, one piece of art one time per month versus, 10,000 PFPs every day, it's the liquidity clearly is going one place as opposed to the other. And so I think we lost a lot of market share by sort of like pursuing more of this like art narrative as opposed to like the generative PFP narrative. So that sort of like leads us into sort of where we are today, which is we're sort of embracing all of the NFT space, not particularly art, not particularly PFPs, but want to sort of embrace everyone and all creators. And so that sort of like led us to wanting to also create this aggregator technology. Is we ultimately want to serve creators by getting their work in front of the buyers. And then we also want to serve buyers by saying, hey, we have the lowest prices here. You'll be able to find not the best deal per se, but the lowest price NFT out of any collection will be sort of shown to you. So if you want to get in, if you want to buy, like this is the place to do it.
How does the functionality on that work? So you're like, as an aggregator, you're displaying all of those. What is the user experience like? Are they then taken to whatever, not taken to the other marketplace, but like, is that transaction done through the other marketplace through the Rarible interface, or how does that all work?
Yeah. So what's great about the way that the aggregator is built is we've partnered with these other marketplaces, either through their APIs or, with the companies themselves, just to get like access to their order books. So when you type in, I'm just going to use doodles as a collection. I have a doodle. I love my dudes. So, when you type in doodles on Rarible and you go and you hit enter and it brings you to all of the listings, it will show you all of the NFTs that are listed. And then in the bottom corner, it'll show you sort of where they're listed. So it'll have like, let's say the X2Y2 logo, the LooksRare logo, the OpenSea logo. It shows you where they're listed, but the checkout experience is completely on Rarible. And because we have that access to sort of like the order books of these other entities, you're able to do it all on Rarible. You check out, and then it'll pull that NFT. Once the transaction is successful, it'll just pull it right back into your wallet.
And earlier you mentioned you've got a number of competitors, and we're talking about OpenSea, LooksRare, et cetera. But I'm curious, like now in your position as an aggregator, you've got their logos on your website. Obviously, in some respects, they are still competition. You want users to come to Rarible and use Rarible, even if it's through the, aggregator. But, how has that changed the dynamic? Are they still the same type of competitors, or do you view them a little differently?
Yeah, I'd say we definitely view them differently. I think Web3 has always had this like slightly tense approach of like, we're all building the future. But then again, like the money's clearly going, if it goes somewhere, it can't go another place, just like classic opportunity cost. And so like we've seen, at least within the market, a lot of the fees go to OpenSea, which means it can't go to the other places. And that's okay, because we're all sort of like building towards the future, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So of course we're still a business, we're trying to make money. But our relationship with these so-called competitors has changed. Like we see them more as partners, where we're providing the either liquidity again to the collections or the artists or the creators. And then we're also providing value to the consumers, the buyers, by offering the lowest price. So we're almost like all sort of like locking arms and like skipping off down the yellow brick road, sort of. Like I remember when we launched Rarible 2, we actually worked alongside LooksRare and X2Y2, and they actually tweeted about our launch because we were including their orders very specifically. So it actually is beneficial for them to also tell people to use Rarible, because at the end of the day, it's those orders that are getting fulfilled that are listed there. So it's a weird sort of uncharted territory in a lot of ways. So we're trying to figure it out, but our relationship has definitely changed, and we are not shying away from like putting those logos other places.
What's the benefit for Rarible? Is it a certain percent cut of whatever the fee is that the other exchange charges?
To be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure how the fee structure breaks down. I think, and I can come back with a correction if I need to on this, but I think right now what we're trying to do is teach people that Rarible is the best place to buy. So if we're fulfilling an order, let's say from OpenSea, I believe, again, this is going to be like, I can come back to you on this, but I believe OpenSea still makes the 2.5%. It's just fulfilled by us. So we're processing the transaction. We don't necessarily make anything, but we're teaching people that to come to Rarible. Once we get that behavior, a lot of times, like even my fingers, I just type in open, it goes to OpenSea, and I start looking, even though I know Rarible is an aggregator, I work at Rarible. A lot of times it's just that muscle memory. And so I think what we're trying to do right now is change that muscle memory to be like, okay, Rarible, get that association, Rarible. And then, whether our business model changes or doesn't, based on if we can accomplish that or not, it has yet to be seen. But I think right now, sort of our biggest objective is just to like bring people to Rarible, process those transactions. And in doing that, I think we will start to get those native listings where we will then make that. Right now, it's a 1% fee. So I think just changing the user behavior is like the biggest thing. And we're willing to take that like cost, the cost of processing those other transactions. They can have it as long as we get the behavior. Once we get the behavior, then we'll be in a good spot to sort of like launch that more like aggressive revenue target.
And along with the Rarible 2 launch was the RARI token. I'm not sure how to say that right. RARI?
Yeah, RARI.
RARI token.
RARI,
Okay.
RARI. I like to say RARI, but
All right.
whatever you want.
Yeah, so the RARI token, can you explain a bit about sort of how that played into this launch? You know, how was the RARI token distributed, and sort of what value does it offer, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, marketplaces having tokens and token rewards is not really all that new. I want to say Rarible was the first to do it a year or two ago. And then the sort of governing body of the Rarible protocol, which is the Rarible DAO or the Rarible Foundation, voted to stop the rewards. And so as of, I think, like January of this year, rewards have kind of been paused. They've sort of been on the back burner. But in the same vein as what we just talked about bringing people to Rarible, getting them to sort of associate Rarible with good prices, with good UX, UI, the DAO decided to relaunch the token as rewards. And so the way that it works is that every week, the DAO votes on the collections that they want to see receive rewards. And by the DAO, I mean anyone who holds RARI token right now. You might have it because you traded in the past. You might have it because you bought it. But anyone who has RARI that they state or that they lock up on our website, they can vote on these collections. And then once you vote and the collections are sort of selected, then any sort of like listing or buying within those collections will trigger some sort of reward.
And there was an airdrop for Rarible users, I believe. How specifically did that work? Like, who was determined who got RARI token?
Yeah, there was. It's sort of like an airdrop. I think we're right now, just for legal purposes, we're calling it like a claim.
Fair enough.
It's like we have to be sort of like careful around this stuff and like the words that we use. But yeah, so just to incentivize people to sort of come back and also to incentivize people who've been loyal to Rarible, there was a claim where anyone who bought 3 or more NFTs on Rarible during the months of, I want to say, July, August, and September was eligible to claim, and they're still eligible. So if that is either of you or anyone listening, if you go to the RARI Foundation website, you can sort of connect your wallet and you will potentially be eligible.
And so going back to how you mentioned the Rarible DAO can vote on sort of these NFT projects that they want to then reward with RARI token. Is there any sort of ethical or like, weird lines that have to not be crossed in regards to that becoming some sort of like insider knowledge or trading that could then take place, where if you know that if you're in the DAO and you can see that, one project is leading in this vote, that it's going to get more attention. And so then you could go buy it up. I don't know, maybe I'm painting a story of something that isn't really possible or relevant, but is there any ethical or weird technicalities there that are being watched or taken care of?
Not really. I would say it's always possible for people to game systems. I think that's one of like the really interesting things about Web3 is there's always going to be this like subset of all of like if we consider like the Web3 sort of like purists as the people who like build for the benefit of the space, there's always going to be like flippers and farmers is what I call them. There's always going to be people who will like just try to flip the NFT, not because they're in the community, but because it's an opportunity to make money. Or same thing with like yield farmers, for example. Like they don't care about the space. They don't care about the project. They don't care about the company. They just want their yield. And I'm not here to say that that's right or wrong. But there's always going to be people who are like gaming the system for their own personal advantage. So when it comes to these types of votes, like there are certainly whales out there who have a bunch of RARI and can potentially vote for a collection that they own and then have that win. And then they could list those for, however much and, start to sort of like farm RARI. Of course, that's, something that could happen. We have a couple things in place to try to mitigate that. So for example, for the listing rewards, you have to list below 1.4 times, or excuse me, you have to list within 1.4 times the floor price. Yeah, that's the right thing. So for example, you can't list your NFT for like 1,000 ETH and still farm rewards off that. It's just not reasonable. And that would be one of the ways that someone would game the system. So you have to list it. And, 1.4 times is sort of like based on our data. But I believe LooksRare also has a similar sort of like threshold for which you have to list within a certain range in order to qualify for rewards. And that's to mitigate exactly what you're talking about. Another thing to sort of mitigate the habit of wash trading is just that when you buy a collection within the rewards, you get your royalties reimbursed. So if you, let's say you buy a doodle and those royalties, I believe, are set to 5%, you get that reimbursed in RARI, but you don't actually like make anything extra. Like you pay the ETH and then you get it back. So you're like net zero, you're like equal, you're even. So wash trading doesn't actually benefit you. You can do it, but it doesn't benefit you. You don't get anything extra. So we've sort of tried to think about all of the scenarios in which someone would try to like game the system. And while we can't prevent it ever like exactly, we tried our best.
We're recording this episode on November 9th. It's likely going to be released later in the month. An announcement that took place, I believe, yesterday via Twitter is that Rarible is going to support creator royalties. And I know this has been an issue debated and a hot topic amongst artists, creators. We've had an artist such as Amber Vittoria on our show who was, she's been very vocal about maintaining those creator royalties. Can you just, for our audience, explain this what the debate is and why Rarible chose to go the route of supporting creator royalties?
Yeah, sure. So I think the debate really boils down to like why royalties exist in the first place in this space. For anyone who's listening and is maybe new to like some of these terms, like royalties would just apply to a secondary sale of an NFT, and the original creator of that NFT getting a portion of that sale price. So let's say, royalties are set for 5% for, a collection like doodles. Every time, this doodle changes hands when it comes to a marketplace, that 5% would go back to the original creator, being the doodle. So I think there's people out there, particularly artists and creators, who, when the space was maturing and when smart contracts were sort of new and were being respected, saw this as an opportunity to be compensated every time their work was bought and sold. And that was definitely something that, Rarible embraced at the beginning and has always embraced. We began as a place for creators and artists, as I said, and we really always have been community centric. So we've always been a place that has believed in royalties and has believed in this opportunity for artists, creators, collections to, sort of receive a percentage of those NFT sales. I think what started earlier this year was a battle for the liquidity between all of the marketplaces. And what I mean by that is, if let's say X2Y2 shows up and they say, hey, we've technically found this way to bypass the royalties part of the contract. I don't know exactly how it works. I'm not an engineer or a coder, but you can now get all of your NFTs for cheaper because people don't have to factor in the royalties in their price, let's say listed on OpenSea. So, if we're just keeping with the doodles example, their floor is somewhere around 5% of that is, quite sizable. If you don't have to pay that, you can get your NFT, you can get your doodle for cheaper, and then X2Y2 gets the percentage off of that sale. Now, I don't know off the top of my head what X2Y2's platform fee is. It could be 0%, but still just the illustration that certain places started offering these 0% royalties types of sales. Everyone flocks there because they get the NFT that I want, but they don't have to pay the royalties. So that was like sort of this shifting of the liquidity. And then the artists were like, hey, what about us? Why are you bypassing royalties? You know, this is our artwork. This is our livelihood. Same thing with new collections. If a new collection only has, let's say, like 10 ETH after they've minted out, and then they burn through that 10 ETH and they have no royalties or secondary income, the project dies. And so we've always been of the opinion that creators, collections, artists are due these royalties and they should be respected. So the thread that we put out yesterday, which is pinned to our profile right now, just talks about sort of like our thinking, our history, why we believe in royalties, and sort of the approach that we're taking that we believe is healthiest for the space.
What has been the response from some of the creators and artists in the space?
It's been fantastic. I think there's this really interesting set of competing interests that it's for us at Rarible, like we know where we stand, but for a lot of people, it sort of it depends on where you land within the space. And I'll give you an example. If you're an artist, of course you want 2.5%, 5%, 7% on every sale, particularly if you have a collection that's doing well, and you're just sort of like relaxing and making money. Now, and not to say that artists are just like sitting back and doing nothing and trying to like rack their bills, but just saying like, if you are an artist or a creator, of course that makes sense for you and your livelihood and like your income. On the opposite side of the spectrum, if you are an NFT collector, of course you want to get that highly sought after NFT for the lowest price. The lowest price oftentimes will be from a marketplace that has 0% platform fees and 0% royalties. So those two things automatically are in conflict. And then you have the tertiary layer of the marketplaces themselves trying to get the liquidity of the buyers. So trying to get the buyers to process those transactions on their marketplaces, but they also need the goodwill and they need the ability for those creators to keep listing. So it puts them in a very awkward, weird position where it's sort of like chicken and an egg. You can't have one without the other, but you have to sort of put a stake in the ground. And so I think for us, like coming out in support of royalties, always having supported royalties, and always we will support royalties. Where that takes us, it's like a little bit unknown because it's definitely contrary to the sort of tide that we're seeing in the space towards 0% royalties or optional royalties. I think it's a pretty like clear, logical deduction that if you don't have to pay something, you won't. And so we're just sort of seeing that like people can bypass royalties, people can get 0% platform fees, they can get that really cheap NFT, but at the expense of what we believe is like the health of the space. So the reaction from creators has been incredible. The reaction from individuals, you know, while no one has tweeted us and said this, the individuals and the collectors are probably like, yeah, we're going to go somewhere else. So, you know, we're relying on that community that we've built. And that's where my role sort of comes in, is like, we want to foster like a healthy community of people who believe in building for the space, not just like being here for themselves. And while it's challenging, we do believe it's possible.
Yeah, on this whole subject, I think it's one. I mean, you articulated it well, like the different angles and the different sort of motivations that each sort of player has in this whole, in this whole battle, if you will. But if we were to remove the players and their motivations, and we were to just say, what's the right thing? You know, like what's ethically right? I mean, to me, it seems hard to argue that the creators shouldn't get their royalties, because at the end of the day, you think like back to what has made NFTs take off, like what is the real benefits that this technology offers? And that's one of the huge benefits that doesn't exist in the traditional space. Like it's one of those game-changing aspects where in the traditional space, if you're an artist and you create a beautiful painting that you go sell. I mean, you could even look at it from like the sad story angle, which is maybe you sold it for $100 and you blew up later, and through all your struggles to become a known artist, and now that same piece is selling on the secondary market for $100,000, but you don't get a dime of it. This is like one of those parts of the technology that is so important, but people are squabbling because they want money or liquidity or whatever. I mean, what are your thoughts just from the ethical standpoint?
Yeah, I personally tend to agree with you. I think my personal view is I don't, and this shouldn't ruffle any feathers. I just need people to like actually listen to my full sentence here before they like immediately like pause the episode and hate tweet me. I don't think that artists deserve royalties just because they've made art. That to me is not the full story. To me, the story is when a creator has a smart contract that has 2.5%, 5%, 7.5%, whatever, as the royalties, if you want to engage with that smart contract, you need to follow all of the rules, stipulations, etc., within the contract. That's like literally the definition of a contract is I follow my end of the bargain, you follow yours. And if you want to buy this NFT, you should be willing to engage with the entire smart contract in its entirety. Now, that to me is ethical. So just the idea, there's like local artists out here who don't care if they're painting their IRL painting or their NFT, artwork gets royalties. So just because it's art, I don't think that automatically qualifies it. I do think for me that ethical part comes into the smart contract and engaging with it in an ethical way. You also have people then claiming like permissionless innovation. And like, if you can bypass that, if you can build a solution that bypasses that, like we don't need permission to do that. I tend to think that is unethical. To me, it's sort of like you are able to, I don't know, what's a good example? Like you are, you go to some like dark website to like stream a movie that is, in theaters that you really want to see, but you don't want to pay the ticket price. Have we all done it? Absolutely. Is it ethical? Probably not. And that, if we boil it down, like could be considered something like IP theft or could be considered, any other types of things. So like, just because you can bypass something doesn't necessarily mean you should, in my opinion. So I tend to, fall within the camp that if a creator has as a part of, their smart contract, or as a part of like the way that they've set up their collection on a marketplace like Rarible as like 5%, like you should pay it if you want that NFT. If you can't afford to pay it or don't want to pay it, don't get the NFT. Like to me, it's that simple, but ethics are oftentimes very personal. And like right now, at least with the way that contracts are set up, I believe the only way to enforce that is by having something like a deny list. And I think Tyler Hobbs in the QQL camp have denied X2, Y2 the ability to like call like the transfer, which would prevent them from selling. So I think as of right now, that's really the only enforceable way. I would hope that we build solutions that would allow royalties to be enforced. But that's why we've sort of created this sort of opposite view of like, we want to reward people who pay royalties. And I've touched on that, is we reimburse people who do. So sorry, that was long-winded.
So Adam, this has been a really interesting conversation, super informative. We're getting close to the end of the interview where we ask every single guest we have on the show the same 3 questions. So we'll get there in a second. But before we do, I'm curious, what is the NFT you have in your own wallet that you are most stoked about?
I would have to say my doodle.
I figured based on earlier references to the conversation.
I don't know. I had this plan. This was like just seeing where the market was going. I was like, okay, I get it. We're in a bear market, but like everything is telling me that, this technology is going to be huge. So I was like, I'm going to like stack like 10 ETH before the merge and then just see what happens. I then spent it all on a doodle. Not exactly, but I then spent it all, and I am like super happy because that community is dope. That I would say is like my favorite like collection. There's another NFT that I have by a friend of mine. He's an artist. His name is Vinny Hager, and he has a collection of one of one letters, he calls them, and they're all sort of like digital paintings. And I bought one of those earlier this year, and that's my favorite sort of like art NFT.
Very
and I
cool.
did pay royalties on it.
There you go. There you go. Well, as I mentioned, we ask every guest of Show Me the Crypto the same 3 questions in a segment we call You Had Me at Crypto. Ulf is going to ask you those.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, first question. Who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
Oh man. You guys are really putting me on the spot here. I have to say a meme account called Minister of NFTs. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. I can send the URL to you afterward. Yeah, it's a Twitter account. It's just memes. It's like degen memes, and it's exactly the type of content I need.
Love it.
That's awesome. I know I'm going to love it already.
Yeah.
All right, second question. What will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
Oh, I am an expert at this question, and it's the reason I've been stacking Bitcoin. So Kathy Wood and her team at ARK Invest have put forward a pretty bold price prediction for Bitcoin in 2030. Her team is predicting that it's going to be like within the range of $1 million. And within one of their reports, they actually have a pretty detailed breakout of where they think that million is going to be, anywhere from institutional investment to sovereign wealth to like, plenty of other things. They have it all sort of portioned out. So definitely check that out if you haven't already seen it. But $1 million in 2030.
Sweet. I love it. All right. Third question. What is the most underrated coin, project, NFT in all of crypto?
Can I say the RARI token?
No, you can't. You can't self.
No
chill.
chill.
I can't chill. I am a big fan. So you guys have heard about my love of doodles. I would say the second sort of like ecosystem of projects that I'm super stoked about is Altered State Machine. They are building these like AI brains that are going to power the NFTs, and they're building this entire like network. Like they're building a blockchain with Ripple. And they're building this entire sort of like network of interconnected AI that's going to be taught and then is going to be able to learn. And they want this to have applications outside of just NFTs. They want it to have applications in medicine, in science, and all these different places. So definitely the Altered State Machine series of projects, which are Fluffs, Party Bears, Brains. There's like all these ones, and they're super cool.
Interesting. A couple things to check out, the meme NFT Twitter account and that as well. Adam, you've done a fantastic job explaining everything. Thank you so much for joining Ulf and I on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And please have me back in a couple of years when my bags are bigger so I can tell you that personal success story.
All right.
We will.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.